Welcome, welcome. It's Andryanna. Happy December to you. How are you? How has the start of the month been for you? I just want to start this episode by acknowledging you and acknowledging this very busy season that we're in. However you're feeling, I just want to recognize that right now. And I want to share that, this episode is really all about the art of not pushing through, why rest really matters more than ever. And so I am right alongside you here. Last week, I'm not sure what it was, maybe it was Mercury in retrograde, maybe it was something to do with my cycle, maybe it was, some viruses that were going around, but I was feeling really, really low on energy last week. And I really had to turn inward and make some little shifts to make life a little bit easier for myself. And, when that energy tank hit empty, instead of feeling bad, instead of, berating myself or belittling myself, instead of pushing through, I had to focus on resting, making some changes, saying no to a few things so that I could be there for the things that really, really I had to do and accomplish, and the things that I really wanted to be there for. And then I had to let a few things slide. So sometimes, less really is more. But this episode is really about giving ourselves permission not to push through when we're feeling depleted, and learning how to recognize when that comes and what we really need, and being able to do those little mini check-ins. So that's what this episode is about. If that sounds good to you, let's dive right in. Hey, I'm Andryanna Gonco, and this is the Juggle is Real podcast. As I share my ongoing journey from experiencing burnout to leading a more mindful and intentional life with better balance, I hope you feel seen, that you realize your worth, lighten your load, and prioritize your own needs. As we hear from leading experts and well-known faces in the wellness, entrepreneurship, education, and motherhood space, I hope you gain insights, proven practices, and learn actionable tools to help you enjoy the juggle of work, family, and everything in between with a little less stress and a lot more ease, joy, and fun. Most of all, I hope you find what you need to simplify, streamline, and supercharge your own journey of better balance and self-love. Are you with me? Let's get started. All right. The art of not pushing through. It's something that I've talked about before on the podcast. And I think during this time, when, it's the hustle and bustle of this beautiful holiday season, and we truly, truly want to be the magic makers, and we want to be there for all the important moments, and we want to enjoy some holiday cheer and experience that joy. A lot rests on our shoulders, and the weight can become really heavy, especially when we're trying to do all of the tasks that we normally complete on a regular basis. And so, if that's you, I want to invite you to listen to the last episode of The Juggle is Real. It was a replay, but it's really about how to set those boundaries, how to examine what's on your plate. And there's a really beautiful exercise. It's going to help you to set the intention and the priorities for yourself this month. And for this episode, I want you to listen with sort of this frame of mind and ask yourself this question. Think about the last time you felt really overwhelmed or really depleted or burnt out, and what would have helped you in that moment during that time. Because we're going to go over a few things today. We're going to talk about the myth of the hustle. We're going to look at recognizing when to pause, and then some steps to help us to stop pushing through. And then I have a little mini exercise for you at the end. So think of it through that lens. The last time you really felt like you were on empty, what would have helped you? And through that lens, let's talk about this myth of the hustle, because there are so much pressure. Society, I mean, makes us feel like we should totally be able to do it all. And it really perpetuates burnout, especially for women, especially for moms, especially for the quote magic makers in the household. And so there's actually research from Deloitte that reveals that 53% of women feel burnt out due to trying to balance the work, the family, and personal responsibilities. And that's a lot of us. You know a lot about my background and my personal experiences, but just recently this summer, and I've talked about this, I found myself with shingles. And so I just want to share that even someone who's talking about this on a regular basis and trying to support you, I mean, I butt up with this as well. And so let's think about or maybe reflect on a time that you pushed through. You went a little too hard. You had good intentions, but you didn't stop. You didn't pause. You didn't rest. You didn't do what you needed to do. And then ultimately you paid the price. Maybe it was getting sick. You're just a little bit too run down. And so that you couldn't even enjoy the moments that you were trying to create because you were pushing through too much. Maybe you had to miss something work related or family related. Maybe it has led to more serious health problems. Maybe it's just led to, big blowouts or big arguments or things that you wish that you could take back. So I really want to emphasize here that it's not your fault, but what we're going to talk about is recognizing those signs, because it's the pushing through that can really lead to exhaustion, lead to that reduction of that positivity, of that holiday cheer. And then those feelings of resentment, the feelings of frustration, the feelings of overwhelm and anger, and just not being able to move forward. So let's talk about recognizing when it's time to pause, right? It's not pushing through. And it's a little bit of an art, right? Because there are those times when we just need a little bit of adrenaline to get us through to that next thing, and then it's going to support us. But sometimes we're doing that too much and it's just on repeat over and over and over. And that's when our adrenal glands get fatigued. And that's when we're on that fight, flight, freeze mode all of the time. And that's not helpful, right? Our body cannot deal with that on an ongoing, permanent basis. So how can we recognize it? And there are some signs. I'm going to share some signs, but I want you to think about it in your own perspective. Was there something in the past for you that now looking back and reflecting on it, you can think, oh yeah, when that happened, I should have maybe just said no, or I should have maybe taken a nap instead of pushing through. What is it for you? So here are some signs. Obviously, it's the fatigue and that sort of, that fog, right? That brain fog, that lack of focus. So if you're trying to push through and you're at your desk or you're trying to work and you can't focus, it's taking you a lot longer than it typically does. Or you're just feeling like really tired. And like this was me last week, like for me, something like emptying the dishwasher, it's not my favorite thing to do, but I can do it with ease. It takes me, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 minutes. Last week, the thought of emptying the dishwasher, it was just like, oh my God, it felt like such a huge task, something that I felt like I couldn't overcome. And it was like this burden on me. So instead of pushing through, I had to learn to, okay, what can I do now instead of emptying the dishwasher that's going to help me refuel so I can get to those things? So the fatigue, the lack of focus, the brain fog, something like, a lot of irritability. If you find yourself, thinking those nasty thoughts, maybe you're not saying it, but you're like, oh my God, the next person that comes at me, they are going to get a mouthful. Or maybe you are really irritable and you're snapping at your family or your kids or your spouse or your friends. That can be a sign that it's time to take a step back, maybe do a little pause. If you find yourself this season getting frequent colds, a lot of sniffles, I know there's a lot going around, and depending on what, your vocation is, if you're working with children a lot or, in places where there's a lot of germs, that can be the cause. But if you find yourself getting, more colds than normal, or something like a lot of headaches or a lot of, an upset stomach and digestive issues, that can be a sign that, you might be pushing a little too hard and it might be time for a little pause or incorporating the pause. That feeling on edge can sometimes be that little sign that can tell us, okay, I think I need to take that pause. And so there are 4 types of burnout that were identified by Dr. Sandra Dalton Smith. I'm going to go over them quickly. And I know this has been my experience, but depending on what your experience is, you might be exhibiting a different feeling. And so you might not be thinking of it as burnout or as that sign that you need to pause. Because that physical burnout, of course, is your body feeling really tired, really achy, not being able to push forward. It's really a lot of that nervous system dysregulation. The mental burnout as well is the second type of burnout. Mental burnout can be that difficulty concentrating, that decision fatigue, that brain fog. There's also that emotional aspect to burnout. So that's number three. Emotional burnout is that feeling of detachment, that feeling of overburden, that feeling of that overwhelm, or that feeling of knowing there's a lot and things you have to do, but really just not giving an F, and just really detaching yourself emotionally. And then number four would be that social burnout, where you're feeling really, really drained by social obligations or the relationships in your life, things that you would normally really enjoy, like, going out with friends or, enjoying a family night. You're really feeling drained by that. It's feeling like it's just too much. And, I've shared on the podcast before, really, especially as women, we are cyclical beings, right? And so our cyclical energy is something that we really should be paying attention to, and how our bodies naturally ebb and flow. And so we have to respect these rhythms and pay attention to them. And I did do a podcast episode on that, on our cycle. So you can go back and look into that one. It was with Dr. Danielle Watson. If you're thinking that, maybe there are certain times of the month where you just are feeling a lot more drained, or times in the month where you do have a lot more energy and you're feeling a lot more uplifted, it's really important that we pay attention to, but most importantly, that we respect our own cycles, our own rhythms of energy, and we do things to support ourselves during our full cycle. So recognizing it. So understanding what those signs are, understanding how it's impacting us physically, mentally, emotionally, and socially. So when those cues come up, when those little signs, those whispers are trying to communicate, we can recognize it right away. And that comes through to our next part of this episode, which is, how do we stop pushing through? How do we take that pause when we have really busy lives, when it's the holiday freaking season and the things have to happen and we have to be the merrymakers? So I want to share 3 steps that can support you in not pushing through. And this is the art of not pushing through. So what can we do? Well, number one, we can reassess and prioritize. So that's a lot of what I had to do last week, was really just looking inward and being like, what is on my to-do list and what actually needs to get done? Because I guarantee you 99% of the time, there are things that you're stressing about, that you're thinking, I really have to do that, that really, if push came to shove, you could let that slide for a few hours or a day or a week. So you can visualize, what is that to-do list, or take a look at what you have on your plate right now and identify, like maybe circle or look at like what really needs to get done. So let's prioritize these things and ask yourself, what can wait? And also, maybe more importantly, what isn't mine to carry? What am I putting on my list that doesn't have to be there at all? So what's on the to-do list? What actually needs to get done? What can wait? What's not mine? What do I not have to have here? And then here's you can kind of um, you know, depending on how you use your to-do list, or how you organize your thoughts, maybe put it into like a color coding, would be nice, super important, not important. If it happens, great. If not, no big deal, right? So having sort of those tiers of like, hey, this really, really, really needs to get done. I'm on deadline. It has to happen. If this doesn't happen, then like a whole, slide of things are going to, hit the fan. What it would be great. And if it happens, great. If not, no big deal. And what, like, hey, what can we not add to our list? What can we not feel guilty about? What can we release just for the month of December or altogether? So, this week, there were a lot of non-essential tasks. There were things that I had to focus on that really truly mattered to me for my family. This past weekend was really busy. My husband was coaching all of our children. My oldest had two different tournaments, one volleyball, one hockey. My middle son had hockey. Our youngest had hockey. There were a lot of things that had to be done. And I knew I needed my energy. I knew that I needed to be present, and I wanted to be present. I wanted to be there, and I needed to support my family in those moments. So leading up to it, I had to release some things. I had to, say no to those non-essential tasks, really prioritize my sleep, my rest, and really going back to basics on what is going to support me. So, step number one in the art of not pushing through is really assess what's going on, assess what's on your plate, and prioritize, and really be very, very brutally honest with yourself for what actually has to happen and what can wait or what doesn't have to be done. Step number two is to ask for help. I know. Just ask for help. Be supported. Ask for and receive that support. I mean, I know I talk about this a lot. It's just that it's not a sign of weakness. It's this form of self-care, because the more that you can be supported, the better you're going to feel. And so this week, I asked Ryan to support me with other tasks. I asked my family. I had to say no to some work-related things. I had to decline a party invitation that, of course, could have been fun, but really wasn't a priority for me. And then prompted, what can I remove and what can I get help with? So who could you ask for help this week? And what would it free up for you to be able to focus on? I know there are many of us who don't have the village or the support networks that we really, truly wish for. But if you think about it, like, what can you do? And that help can be in the form of just making it easier for yourself, getting that takeout or picking up pre-made meals at the grocery store, or like having something super easy instead of a big gourmet meal. It's having craft dinner for dinner because your kids are actually going to eat it, and it's not difficult to make, and it's an inexpensive, easy meal that is a one pot thing, and just being done with it. So the art of not pushing through also means to ask for the support that you need. And then number three, we're not pushing through. We want to pause. So we're going to identify the right type of rest that's going to support us best. So there are, 7 different types of rest, again, according to Dr. Dalton Smith. And, going over it, I want you to think about last time you felt that burnout or that pushing over the brink. What could you have needed? What would have supported you most? And then moving forward, thinking about these different types of rest, what's going to support you moving forward? So, of course, physical rest, resting your actual body. Number 2 is mental rest. So, releasing that mental load, even just for a few minutes through, meditation or visualization, or just turning off notifications, putting your phone away for a few hours, waiting, not checking your email every 10 minutes. What's going to give you that mental rest that you might need? Number 3 is emotional rest. Are you in situations or, part of, texting chains, or, finding yourself being brought into the mix of things that, is not necessarily good for your emotional health? It could be even like, listening to things that aren't supportive, watching shows that are, a little bit too hectic for you, and just taking a break from things that aren't supporting you emotionally. And then number 4, this kind of goes with the types of burnout, is that social rest. So we are in this beautiful season of merriment and cheer, but do you have to say yes to absolutely everything that comes along? Or are there breaks that you can take that will allow you to really focus on the things that you truly, truly, truly want to do? Number 5 is that sensory rest. So taking a break from overstimulation. We are constantly bombarded with, lights and visuals and a lot of auditory. And if you're, a mom, especially if you have young children, you're being touched all the time, you're supporting your children. So can you just take a break from that overstimulation, over sensory stimulation? Something like a bath can be soothing, something like, just being in quiet, even when you're driving alone, instead of having, music playing or something, just having that sensory break. Um, the next one, number 6, is not necessarily what you would think of when you're talking about rest, but this is having that creative break. So tapping into something that's totally different from what you're doing in your life, having that time for that creative connection. So those things that are really renewing you and inspiring you and tapping into different parts of your brain and allowing that creative nature to just flow without having something in mind. It doesn't have to make money. It doesn't have to be a beautiful finished product, but just things that are allowing you to be creative in ways that fill your cup. And then the final type of rest identified by Dr. Sandra Dalton Smith is spiritual rest. So this is spiritually connecting to something greater, something bigger than yourself. So regardless of, any type of religion that you might practice or what you might think about God, what is something that you can do that helps you connect inward, turn inward, realize, that you are part of something much bigger than yourself, even if it's just you as part of your bigger family unit, you as part of your community, you as part of the greater country, greater, world that we're living in, and just thinking of it from that perspective and that spiritual view. So, like an example, I needed that mental rest last week. So I had to put my phone away, I had to turn off the notifications. And instead of doing my usual scroll before bed, I did some journaling instead. Instead of watching Netflix, I read my book instead. So, what is it that you need? What is the right type of rest that's going to refuel you, that's going to fill your tank, even in small ways? So, the physical rest, in some cases, it might be sleeping more, but it might be being more active. And that's actually going to propel you to regain that energy. So, taking that walk, joining that class, and, not skipping that type of activity that you normally love. And sometimes the art of not pushing through is giving yourself that 5 or 10 minutes of breathing room to say, okay, am I going to do it? I'm going to try it for 5 minutes. If I'm still feeling like I don't want to, I'm going to release it. I'm going to stop. But if it's supporting me, then I'm going to push through to continue it if it's going to help me. And so those are sort of the art. And, it changes depending on how you're feeling. It changes depending on what's going on in your life. It changes depending on your cycle. So the 3 steps in not pushing through is, number 1, to reassess and prioritize. Number 2, to ask for help when you need it. And number 3, to identify the type of rest that's really going to support you most. So as we close out this episode, I just want to leave you with a bit of an exercise or just something that you can think about and consider, especially in the moments that you're recognizing you might need a pause. I want you to stop and ask yourself, so we can do this right now. Number 1, how am I feeling? Like, really and truly, how am I feeling right now? Number 2, what type of rest would best support me in this moment? Is it going to be the physical, mental, emotional, social, sensory, creative, or spiritual rest that I'm really craving that's really going to help me? And it might be a combination, right? It could be emotionally, you really need to chat with a friend. And so you plan to go for, a walk after dinner in a couple of days. It could be something that really taps into, that creative experience for you, or just, revisiting that gratitude practice. So number 1, how am I feeling? Number 2, what type of rest would best support me right here, right now, even in a very small way? And then number 3, what can I let go of? What can I say no to? What can I actually release or hit pause on to make room for that rest? And it's great to think about it and to consider it, but writing it down, even popping it in the voice notes and actually saying it out loud, that's going to reaffirm it. That's going to actualize it. That's going to make it real. And then your ability to be accountable to yourself in choosing the type of rest, in saying no to something, in actually making it happen is going to be a lot greater than if you just kind of had that fleeting thought about it. And so the Juggle is Real Authentic Self-Care Planner is really supportive because it goes through this process every day of asking yourself these questions, of deciding how best to care for yourself and reaffirming why it matters and why you're so worthy of taking that pause and experiencing that rest, and taking a moment for feeling grateful for what it is that you're doing for yourself. And so I invite you to ask yourself those 3 questions, jot down the answers, and actually follow through in these small and simple ways to actually get the rest that you need, especially during the holiday season. So, as we close out this episode, I just want to remind you that giving yourself that grace instead of feeling the guilt truly is the key to the sustainable well-being, right? It's not the touch and go back and forth from burnout to feeling great, back up and down. It's really giving yourself that grace on an ongoing basis, reflecting on, that rest in your week, making it a part of your week and incorporating it in those easy ways. I mean, the saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. But what I like to say is that you can refill it anytime you choose. And choosing what you'll refill it with is really up to you. And I hope that you can take something from this episode, the types of rest, to help you overcome those feelings when you are pushing through and recognizing those signs. So thank you so much for tuning into this episode. Remember, rest isn't weakness, it is wisdom. So let's look at our to-do list. Let's decide what we can let go of. Let's maybe tag me on Instagram. Let me know what your favorite takeaway was of this episode, or tell me how you are giving yourself grace, how you are going to tap into the art of the pause, the art of not pushing through. And if you caught yourself, if you're going to catch yourself, let me know. You can, find me on Instagram at Andryanna G. That's ANDRYANNAG. You can email me. There is a email address in the notes for this podcast episode. And of course, as always, share it with a friend, someone who could get a little tidbit to support them this holiday season. Write me a review on Apple Podcasts. It is the easiest way to support others in getting this information. And don't forget to subscribe. We've got so many beautiful episodes coming up to support you during this busy season and into the new year, because it really is so important to consider yourself amidst all of the hustle and bustle. So until the next episode, I send you so much love. Take good care.